So welcome back to Outdoors with the Morgans. Since we started this YouTube channel, our main focus has been doing videos on what we do around here and now what we're doing on the new property in West Virginia. And I think a lot of people like coming here to kind of get away from all the nonsense in the world. Now occasionally, like today for example, we will publish a video that's a little out of the ordinary from what you're used to seeing. And normally they're pretty well received. I mean, there's always a few people that want it to be known by the world they are unsubscribing from the channel, but those are few and far between. And on a side note, I never understood why people do that. Just last week, when I published that video with the stop sign incident in it, one guy typed up a whole paragraph how he was been considering unsubscribing for the channel for some time, and this clinched it for him. He really put a lot of thought and time into it. I never understood that. It's not necessary at all. Channel the same way as our annual Independence Day party. You know, we invite a couple hundred people over, everybody shows up, they have a good time, but if there was someone there that didn't like being there and they're complaining the whole time, I think it would be in everyone's best interest if they just left. So with all that being said, today we're going to talk about student loan forgiveness. This has definitely been the story of the week last week. Everybody's talking about it. I think a lot of people are pretty worked up about it. But before I get started, I want to be clear. I don't have any resentment at all towards anyone that is able to accept that money. The way I see it, you know, if the government is dumb enough to do something like this, I really can't blame anyone for taking it. Now, I know my opinion doesn't matter, but I'm going to tell you what my first problem is with this student loan forgiveness. It's what they're calling it. This has nothing to do with anything being forgiven. I mean, if it's such a great idea, they should call it what it is. What's happening here is they're taking a debt and an obligation from a certain group of people, and they are transferring that to another group of people that never agreed to it. That's what's going on here. There's no loan forgiveness. It's just a transfer of that debt and that obligation from one group of people to another group of people. The best way I can describe it is like this. Let's say you have 6 children. One of your kids approaches you and says, "Dad, I want to buy a used car. Can you lend me $5,000? And you think about it for a day or two and you say, you know what? I'm going to lend you the $5,000. You come to an agreement on the repayment plan. Everything's good. You give the kid the $5,000. They buy the car. A few months later, they come to you and say, you know what, Dad, paying you back is kind of a pain in the neck. You know what I mean? I'm having trouble making these payments. And you say to them, you know what? Your loan is forgiven. You don't owe me another dime. Enjoy the car. That would be loan forgiveness. But what the government here is doing, they're telling that kid when they come to them and say they can't make the payments, that's okay. Don't worry about it. All your brothers and sisters will pay for your car. Now, what the cost of this is actually going to be, nobody seems to really know, but estimates range from around $300 billion up to $1 trillion, and that came from the Penn Wharton Business School. They did a complete analysis on the whole thing. So yeah, anywhere from $300 billion to $1 trillion is what this is going to cost. Another problem that I have with this is our government doesn't have any money to give away. This whole situation would be like, you know, you've got some drunk guy in the bar that owes everybody in the bar money and everyone in the town money, and they stand up and yell, hey, next round is on me. There is $1.75 trillion of student loan debt in this country. It's a ridiculous amount of money. But what's even more ridiculous is the federal government is fast approaching $31 trillion in debt. Now, here's my biggest issue with the whole thing. I was reading an article the other day because you're starting to see some articles come out from people saying what a great idea this is because they know there's been a lot of pushback and a lot of angry people, so they try to convince you that it's a great idea. But this story was from a guy in Texas. He was a millennial. They made sure to put that in the headline. And he had like $126,000 or $136,000 in student loan debt. And he had just recently paid that off. And it is his opinion that they should forgive all of the money. And I think that article was written to try to convince people that, hey, look, this guy's not mad. You shouldn't be mad either. Interesting point about that story, though. I think the guy had 2 degrees, doesn't use any of them, and he actually self-taught himself how to write code and got a job in like software development or something. He's doing pretty good now. But anyway, this guy says we should just, forgive all the loans and everything would be fine and dandy. And it goes on to say in that article that the federal government hasn't done enough to keep up with rising tuition. And that's the part that really got to me, because the problem with this whole thing is caused by the government. If you look, I looked at some charts of like the inflation rates throughout the years, right? And then you look at college tuition, the inflation rate's going like this, and college tuition is going like this. It started making a huge uptick whenever the government got in the business of lending kids any amount of money for any degree to go to college. Colleges and universities, they quickly realized they have a cash cow here, because the government is going to lend any 18-year-old kid however much money they need, no matter what it's for. What degree, what school you go to, it doesn't matter. They keep raising tuition, things get out of hand, kids can't pay the money back. Now they want to do loan forgiveness. But during all this, there's no talk of, revamping the whole student loan process. They're still making loans today while they are trying to forgive loans because it's impossible for these kids to pay the money back. That's my biggest issue with this whole thing. The government created the problem, then they come up with a solution that's just going to make things worse, and they will not admit that it was all a big mistake. If they would came out, they could have sold this better, at least in my eyes, if they would say, what, we never should have gotten the business of lending money to kids to go to college. Because what that did, that raised tuition. I mean, supply and demand, here comes a big supply of money. The colleges say, oh boy, looky here, they just keep raising. Kids borrow more and more. If the government would come back and say, hey, we screwed up, we're going to help bail some of these kids out and try to get back on track, I still don't know if I'd be in agreement with them, but at least I could understand it. But to lend them any amount of money and then bail them out and keep making loans is just nonsense. It makes no sense to me at all. Now imagine if there's a kid that just got out of high school, hard worker, entrepreneurial type kid, and he went to the bank and said, hey, I want to start a landscaping business. I've already got 15 or 20 clients, but I need a new truck. I need to buy some mowers. I'd like to borrow $100,000 to get started. They would literally laugh him right out of the bank. But any kid can go for any amount of money, and they just start writing checks. The kid's on the hook for it. It's unfortunate. Well, the kid was on the hook for it until now. It's just really screwed up. It's a horrible way to do things, and I think this is why we are where we are. Now, another issue I have with all this, and this is more on a personal level, our daughter Hannah went to college. She went to a smaller school. She got a 4-year degree. She worked before, during, and after to pay for her college, and we helped her out a little bit, but she paid for the majority of her college and graduated debt-free. And all that time, Melissa and I were telling her this is the right thing to do. She's seeing her friends go to whatever school they want, spend money like crazy, going on trips, doing whatever. And we're telling Hannah all along, you're doing the right thing. Trust us. This will all work out in the end. You'll graduate with no college debt. Don't worry about what the other kids are doing. You're doing fine. Well, here we are a few years later, and she's seeing a lot of those kids that she went to school with being paid back for the loans they made and the decisions that they made. So it's kind of a tough pill to swallow, probably for kids that paid their way through school, or kids that didn't even go to college. They might have went into the trades, or a young plumber, electrician, landscaper. I mean, there's a million different things you could do where you didn't have to go to college. And I think, for me personally, I don't care. At this point in my life, I could coast to the finish line, but I do feel bad for the younger kids that are trying to do the right thing, and the government is just setting a very, very poor example for those kids. They're rewarding irresponsibility and bad decisions instead of rewarding the kids that did the right thing. That's my opinion. But anyway, like I said earlier, it's my opinion one of the main reasons college costs so much today is because the federal government stuck their nose where it didn't belong, and they didn't learn their lesson apparently. But I think things are starting to change. I really do, and I'll tell you why. Now, daughter Eva is a senior in high school right now, and things are definitely changing from when our other kids went to school, and here's why. What you see on the table here all came in the mail in just the last 2 days. And I'm not exaggerating here. It has been like this since last October. These are all addressed to daughter Eva. You've got Ohio University, Drexel, Miami, another Ohio University. What's this? Randolph, Waynesburg, Meredith, Belmont, Orchard Hill. Now, I think a lot of these colleges and universities are starting to get a little bit desperate because enrollment's down, and a lot of kids and their parents are starting to realize that the path to success doesn't necessarily include a 4-year degree. Now, I just want to be clear. I don't have anything against going to college. I think for certain people that want to do certain things, I think it's the best move they could make, but it's just not for everyone. And if we could stop lending these kids any amount of money to go to school, I think it wouldn't take long at all, and you would see college tuition drop like a mattress sale on President's Day. But anyway, I think that's it for today's video. I really appreciate y'all being here, and I'll catch you on the next one.